Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. In Pakistan, the National Command and Control Center says the coronavirus pandemic is under control in the country. In a televised address, NCOC head Asad Umar said schools will be reopened from 15th of September and tourism from the 8th of August. Pakistan has seen a considerable decline in the number of coronavirus cases and deaths in the last 3 days. Currently, the country's death toll stands at 6,035, while the number of infections is over 281,000. Spain has reported nearly 1,800 COVID-19 cases overnight, marking the biggest jump since the national lockdown was lifted in June. Over in Brazil, 1,437 people have died, while more than 57,000 have tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed over 708,000 lives and infected more than 18.7 million people. The Saudi-led military coalition says it has destroyed an explosive-laden drone launched by the Houthis in the kingdom's direction. Saudi state media quoted the coalition as saying that the drone was launched from Hodeidah Governorate on Yemen's Red Sea coast. Cross-border attacks by Houthi rebels have escalated since May, when a truce prompted by the coronavirus pandemic expired. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Welcome back. And now the news in detail. In Pakistan, the National Command and Control Center says the coronavirus pandemic is under control in the country. In a televised address, NCOC head Asad Umar said schools will be reopened from the 15th of September and tourism from the 8th of August. Parks, cinemas and museums will be allowed to reopen from the 10th of August. Pakistan has seen a considerable decline in the number of coronavirus cases and deaths in the last 3 days. Currently, the country's death toll stands at 6,035, while the number of infections is over 281,000. Now, Spain has reported nearly 1,800 COVID-19 cases overnight, marking the biggest jump since the national lockdown was lifted in June. Over in Brazil, 1,437 people have died, while more than 57,000 have tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. Now, globally, the virus has claimed over 707,000 lives and infected more than 18.8 million people.
The coronavirus appears to be setting its sights back to Europe, with the second wave surging in many countries. Spain's COVID-19 cases are on the rise again, with Sweden following other regional countries to impose travel restrictions on Madrid. Germany has issued a travel warning for parts of Belgium following a surge in infections. The Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis too has warned of reimposing restrictions if the spike in cases does not halt. While returning restrictions threaten to extend economic slowdown, COVID-led manufacturing, including masks and protective gear, is booming.
Our biggest export market would be the US. Our products are used in many hospitals in the US. Many hospitals have shown their appreciation through emails thanking us for our products. We are very happy that our efforts in research and development has been a success. Secondly, we also export to Canada, Japan and South Korea.
Brazil reports the second highest number of cases and deaths in the world as authorities struggle to get the outbreak under control. Despite the US leading the world tally of infections and deaths, President Donald Trump is pressing to open schools.
Children handle it very well, and they may get it, but they get it, and it doesn't have much of an impact on them. And if you look at the numbers of in terms of mortality, fatality, the numbers for children under a certain age, meaning young, their immune systems are very, very strong. They're very powerful, and they seem to be able to handle it very well. And that's according to every statistic.
Meanwhile, in Asia, mainland China and South Korea have still not been able to eliminate local transmission of the virus. China has recorded 37, while South Korea reported 43 infections overnight.
In India, COVID-19 continues to wreak havoc as the country recorded over 56,000 cases in a single day, becoming the virus epicenter of South Asia. The country's total number of infections is approaching 2 million. Government statistics show the death toll has now climbed to 40,699 with 904 fatalities overnight. Maharashtra is the worst hit state with over 460,000 cases and nearly 16,500 deaths. Tamil Nadu too is reeling from the virus with over 273,000 cases and almost 4,500 deaths. Well, Andhra Pradesh has once again crossed 10,000 daily COVID-19 cases with 77 deaths. These alarming statistics present a monstrous challenge for India's already overwhelmed healthcare system and troubled economy. In India, 8 coronavirus patients have died in a fire in the intensive care ward of a private hospital in the western city of Ahmedabad. The police say the primary cause of the fire appears to be a short circuit. Emergency services say the blaze spread when a medical staffer's personal protective equipment caught fire. Medics said 3 women were among those dead. The rescue officials said around 40 other coronavirus patients at the facility were rescued and shifted to another hospital. Gujarat State Chief Minister Vijay Rupani has ordered a probe into the incident. Pakistan says there is no question of initiating a backdoor diplomacy with India under the current circumstances. In a weekly press briefing, Foreign Office spokesperson Aisha Farooqi said India's unabated brutalities in occupied Kashmir has ruled out the possibility to engage with New Delhi at this point. Farooqi said Pakistan has once again offered New Delhi to appoint a lawyer for a review petition in the case of India's raw-serving terrorist commander Kulbhushan Jadhav. Jadhav is facing death penalty in Pakistan after confessing to espionage and terrorism. She said India has not responded to Pakistan's offer yet. The spokesperson said Pakistan has more expectations from the OIC than any other international organization regarding the Kashmir dispute. She welcomed the closed-door meeting of the United Nations Security Council on Kashmir issue for the 3rd time in a year. The U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee has expressed concerns to India over its brutal siege of occupied Kashmir. This comes a year after India illegally annexed the valley, stripped it of its UN-recognized status, and imposed an inhumane clampdown. In a letter, the committee refuted New Delhi's claims that conditions in occupied valley have returned to normal. Earlier, a member of the same committee, David Traun, called on India to guarantee the human rights of Kashmiris in the occupied valley. Traun's statement read, "Lack of internet has prevented Kashmiris from accessing the information on COVID-19 and hampered healthcare services." Pakistan has thanked members of the United Nations Security Council, especially China, for holding the 3rd meeting on Indian-occupied Kashmir in a year. The meeting coincided with the 1st anniversary of the revocation of the valley's special status. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says that India's gross human rights violations remain a grave concern for the international community. Qureshi said the meeting rebuts India's claim that Jammu and Kashmir is an internal matter. He said it further reaffirms the validity of the UN resolutions on the Kashmir's right to self-determination through an impartial plebiscite. Pakistan's Foreign Office has summoned a senior Indian diplomat to protest ceasefire violations by India along the line of control. In a statement, the Foreign Office said Indian forces are continuously targeting civilians from across the LOC. This follows the martyrdom of an 18-year-old girl and injuries to 6 people in unprovoked Indian fighting in the Hot Springs sector. Indian troops have committed nearly 1,900 ceasefire violations this year so far. The Foreign Office said that the Indian side was called upon to respect the 2003 ceasefire understanding. Pakistan's army says a soldier has been martyred in fighting from across the border with Afghanistan. It said 2 soldiers were also wounded in the incident in the Dir district. Last month, Afghan forces opened unprovoked fighting at the civilians gathered on the Pakistani side of the border in Chaman. Pakistan's Foreign Office said the incident resulted in several casualties and serious damage to infrastructure. In Afghanistan, the Taliban say the Kabul's decision to convene a grand assembly of elders to decide the fate of 400 inmates has no legal grounds. In a statement, the Taliban said all the factions should avoid creating obstacles to the peace process. Under the Doha peace deal, the Afghan government is required to free 5,000 Taliban prisoners as a precondition to intra-Afghan talks. President Ashraf Ghani's government has released all but 400, saying their crimes were too grave. However, the Taliban insist upon the release of all prisoners before the start of the peace talks. Meanwhile, Taliban's deputy leader, Mullah Baradar Akhund, has discussed the peace process with the UN's envoy to Afghanistan, Deobra Lyons. The two officials stressed on the need to finalize the prisoner release process. The Saudi-led military coalition says it has destroyed an explosive-laden drone launched by the Houthis in the kingdom's direction. Saudi state media quoted the coalition as saying that the drone had been launched from Hodeidah Governorate on Yemen's Red Sea coast. Cross-border attacks by Yemeni rebels have escalated since May, when a truce prompted by the coronavirus pandemic expired. In late June, missiles reached the Saudi capital Riyadh, and the coalition retaliated with airstrikes. In 2015, the Arab coalition intervened in Yemen after the Houthis ousted the internationally recognized government from Sana'a. The US says it will table a resolution in the UN Security Council next week to extend the arms embargo on Iran. Speaking to reporters, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington will ensure that the ban is extended. Pompeo said the proposal to extend the ban on Iran is eminently reasonable. He said the Security Council will make a mockery of its mission if it allows Tehran to buy and sell weapons openly. The arms ban is currently set to end on October the 18th under Iran's 2015 nuclear deal with the world powers. The US drafted resolution needs at least 9 votes in favor to force Russia and China to use their vetoes. If it is unsuccessful, the US has threatened to reimpose all UN sanctions on Iran under a process agreed in 2015 deal. China has called to resume dialogue over the South China Sea, saying the water should not become a wrestling ground for international politics. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi said Beijing sees the energy-rich waters as a shared home for countries in the region. Wang said the US should stop its provocative actions and blatant interference in the territorial disputes in the sea. He said Washington is trying to drive a wedge between China and ASEAN nations to serve its domestic politics and geopolitical agenda. Wang urged regional countries to remain vigilant and preserve hard-won peace.
Facts have proved that settling disputes through dialogue is the right way that best serves the interests of regional countries, and countries in the region have a shared responsibility to keep the South China Sea peaceful and stable. Under the current situation, China proposes that we remove all disturbances to restart as soon as possible the Code of Conduct consultation and agree as early as possible on a set of rules for maintaining long-term peace and stability in the region.
The US says it wants to remove untrusted Chinese tech apps from American app stores, alleging significant threats to data security. In a media briefing, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the apps contribute to Beijing's content censorship and surveillance apparatus. Pompeo said federal agencies will collaborate to limit the ability of the Chinese cloud service providers to collect, store, and process data. He said it was crucial to restrict the cloud-based systems run by Chinese firms Alibaba, Baidu, China Mobile, China Telecom, and Tencent. The top US diplomat said the government was doing its utmost to protect personal and intellectual property, including critical vaccine research. Pompeo called upon like-minded nations to collaborate and join a clean global network to protect sensitive information.
By the undersea cables that connect our country and others to the global internet. Huawei Marine significantly underbids other companies on multiple procurements to connect Asia, the Pacific, Africa, and Europe using Chinese state-backed undersea technology. We can't allow that to continue. We call on all freedom-loving nations and companies to join the clean network.
Palestine has called on the international community to sanction Israel over its rights violations in the Palestinian territories. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said Palestine condemns the Israeli expansion and colonial Welcome back. French President Emmanuel Macron says Lebanon will continue to face political and economic crisis unless it enacted reforms. Macron made the remarks while speaking to reporters after reaching Beirut. The French president is the first foreign leader to visit Lebanon after Beirut's explosion that killed 137 people and injured more than 5,000. He was greeted on the airport by the Lebanese counterpart Michel Aoun. Macron said his visit is a gesture of hope for the Lebanese in tough times. He said France is coordinating international relief efforts for the crisis-hit country. Many European and Arabic countries have dispatched medical aid, field hospitals, rescue experts, and tracking dogs to Lebanon. In Somalia, 8 soldiers have been killed and several wounded in an attack on a military base in southwestern Bay province. A government spokesperson says the terrorists attacked a National Army base in Denune. The spokesman said that an army commander was among those killed in the attack. Al-Shabaab claimed the responsibility for the attack via the internet. He added that after the attack, a military vehicle carrying reinforcements was targeted in a roadside blast, wounding several soldiers. A military official said that more than 6 Al-Shabaab fighters were also killed in fierce fighting with the Somali army. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on the Zimbabwean businessman who is also an advisor to President Emmerson Mnangagwa. In a statement, the Treasury Department said it blacklisted Kudakawashe Tagwaidi and Zimbabwe-based company owned or controlled by him. It also accused Tagwaidi of using his relationship with President Mnangagwa to grow his business empire dramatically. The Treasury said the businessman has used his state contacts to gain contracts. Deputy Treasury Secretary Justin Mzunich said the U.S. supports the economic well-being of the Zimbabwean people. He said Washington will target corrupt acts and graft by Zimbabwean politicians and their financiers. Moving on to Turkey, where thousands of women have taken to the streets of several cities to protest against gender-based violence. They demand the country remain a signatory to a 2011 Council of Europe Accord against such attacks. The protests were spurred by an online campaign in the wake of the brutal killing of a female student in the southwestern province of Mogila. President Tayyip Erdogan's ruling AK party officials say they are considering opting out of the pact designed for stronger women's rights. The remarks have alarmed campaigners who see the Istanbul Convention as key to combating rising domestic violence. Many conservatives in Turkey say the pact is counterproductive as it encourages violence by undermining family structures. The death toll from the tropical storm Isaias has risen to 8 as it continues to ravage U.S.'s Atlantic coast with rain and fierce winds. Officials said one woman died in Pennsylvania when her vehicle was overtaken by water and swept downstream. 2 people were killed by falling trees in Connecticut and Delaware, while a woman was found dead inside a New Hampshire house. Electric supply companies said the storm left over 2.8 million homes and businesses without power from New York to North Carolina. The tornadoes suspended a regional rail service in Philadelphia and New Jersey, and the Interstate 676 highway was also closed. U.S. National Hurricane Center said the maximum sustained winds of 105 kilometers per hour went down to 64 kilometers per hour. Torrential rains and flash floods battered northwest China, collapsing roads and exploding a natural gas pipeline in the Shaanxi province. Local government says the rescuers have transported nearly 500 people to safety from the disaster-hit areas. Authorities say the stormy weather will continue to batter the area and call for disaster prevention and flood cleanup. Officials said the pipeline exploded after a nearby road collapsed in Yulin City. Emergency services evacuated over 100 local residents after the explosion.
It happened around 1:40 this morning when we were sleeping. After we were woken up by the loud blast, which was so loud, I went out to check out what happened. When I stepped out of my home, I realized it was a blast from a natural gas pipeline. I saw rocks on the road had exploded to that wall.
In South Korea, a rescue worker has been killed and 5 others are missing when their boats were swept over a dam by surging floodwaters near Chuncheon City. Parts of South Korea have seen 44 consecutive days of rain, the longest monsoon since 2013. This takes the death toll in recent days to 17, with 16 others missing and more than 1,600 people displaced. In the capital, Seoul, the Han River overflowed after authorities were forced to open floodgates on upstream dams. More than 5,000 houses and facilities were reported flooded or damaged in the country. In a visit to one of the hardest hit areas, President Moon Jae-in raised concerns about North Korea releasing excess water without notification. A massive fire broke out more than 20 warehouses of wholesale markets in Najaf, Iraq. Iraqi officials say firefighters are working on site to put out the blaze. Meanwhile, a large inferno broke out at a market in Ajman. Police say the fire has been brought under control. Fortunately, both fires did not cause any casualties. All European stocks have declined. Investors are monitoring a slew of corporate earnings and the Bank of England's decision to leave interest rates unchanged. London's FTSE slumped well over 1%, while Paris's CAC 40 lost over 0.5%. Frankfurt's DAX 2 is trading on or below the flat line. Earlier stocks in the Asia-Pacific traded mixed as investors continue to watch tensions between the US and China with concern. Hong Kong's Hang Seng and Japan's Nikkei 225 dipped, while Seoul's Kospi and Australia's ASX 200 gained. Mainland Chinese shares traded mixed. Another weather situation from around the globe. That is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.